I don't quite know where to start here. I guess we'll start with the original Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad from 2016 is perhaps one of the worst superhero movies in existence, skipping out on all character development, all style and no substance, and boasting a truly boring plot that set the bar really low for James Gunn when he decided to tackle the reboot. It was pretty much a given that with him on the project, the Suicide Squad couldn't possibly be bad, especially given his track record with the Guardians of the Galaxy films. The question in my mind then was, by how much would the reboot surpass the original? According to reviewers, the answer to that question was a lot. When I saw this film getting a literal 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, I could not believe my eyes. Not even the Guardians movies were that good. So I refused to believe that the Suicide Squad was really 100% worthy. And I'm glad I tapered my expectations. Welcome back to Monopinions. To be clear, the Suicide Squad is leagues ahead of its predecessor. This review is not me saying it's just a little better, like with the Snyder Cut review. For as flawed as I thought it was, I actually had a good time watching the movie. My overly critical self just cannot help but point those flaws out. Right out the gate, it's a slaughterhouse. Like half the cast is killed off in the opening minutes, which was extremely jarring, but not for the reason you're thinking. I was well aware going into this film that there would be lots of death, and that was part of the reason why the cast was so bloated. But the way this was marketed made it sound like characters would be killed off incrementally rather than all at once. I don't know, maybe that was just an issue of my own perception. That doesn't really change the fact though that the bloodbath is kind of pointless. Not plot-wise, but stylistically. I understand that it's a popular aesthetic for superhero media nowadays to make things gory and mature, as popularized by Deadpool and furthered by The Boys and Invincible. I can't say I was ever a fan of the gore in Deadpool or Invincible simply because I didn't feel like it enhanced my enjoyment of either in any way, but I thought The Boys was able to use its gore very well even if it's still super over the top. Unfortunately, the Suicide Squad fell under the former category for me. All of this made me realize that this movie relied so much on its star power to draw audiences, but those are pretty minor gripes. Let me get into the nitty-gritty of my complaints, which is, of course, the character development and writing. You may have noticed across all of my reviews I usually come down hardest on the characters, and it's especially true of this film being an ensemble. If I'm not attached to the characters, then I'm not convinced of their relationships and dynamics, which you absolutely have to nail with these team-up films. And I know that James Gunn is able to pull this off because he did so with Guardians, but I didn't think he was able to do the same with the Suicide Squad. I'm pretty sure I know the reason why, and that's the nature of what the Suicide Squad is. I mean, it's in the name of the movie. Every mission the team goes on, they may as well be committing suicide. They're running to their deaths, and James Gunn's approach to this movie was to make sure this wasn't without consequence. As demonstrated by that opening scene on the beach, no one is immune from death. On the one hand, it makes for a solid reintroduction to the series. All these high-profile actors are disappearing from the film in an instant. On the other hand, it sets the precedent to not get attached to any character. Not that there's anybody to get attached to, really, save for two that I'll discuss later. Firstly, the veterans of the squad. There are only 4 returning cast members from the 2016 Suicide Squad. Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, Joel Kinnaman as Rick Flag, Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, and Jai Courtney as Captain Boomerang. 0 of these characters got any development in the 2016 movie, and this reboot does little to redeem that. Amanda Waller is still a taskmaster, Rick Flag is just another strong man who shoots guns, and Boomerang dies in the beach scene, which is shockingly disrespectful, but I agree that he needed to go. Now, Harley already had some substantial development in Birds of Prey, so it's understandable that she didn't get a whole lot of it in this film. The most notable thing that the film does for her is this little monologue about how she needs to protect herself from potential boyfriends, and it kind of explores her trauma from being by Joker's side. But besides that, Harley honestly takes a backseat in this film. She doesn't really have anything to prove, and that's fine, but that leads me to wonder what the point of her being in this film at all is. In the first half of the film, she would just be absent from the screen for long stretches of time, and Her mini-plot of getting captured, killing the Corto Maltesian, and getting captured again does actually nothing for the story. It's strange to think that whenever Harley was on screen, I was actually bored. But that was the case, and that's the biggest disservice that this movie does to her. Waller has this freak out towards the end of the movie where the squad goes against her orders and she starts cursing and calls them, quote, dumb pieces of shit, which strikes me as incredibly uncharacteristic of this usually cold and collected woman. I know there were some other circumstances surrounding that, but it still just felt like it wasn't true to the character. But for me, the most predominant issue among the veterans is Rick Flag, and I can chalk that completely up to lost potential, but some context is necessary first. The squad infiltrates Corto Maltese to destroy all traces of Project Starfish, which turns out to be an alien experimentation center illegally sanctioned by the US government. There's a hard drive that has all the evidence, and when Rick Flag discovers it, he's livid. He declares that he's tired of the lies and snatches the drive with the intention of leaking its contents. One of the squad members, though, who we'll talk about later, was actually ordered to make sure that this secret doesn't get out, and he kills Flag for it. This entire thing was really weird because there was no indication he had been lied to before. Where is his anger coming from? The answer is that it's coming out of nowhere. Flag appeared to be perfectly fine, blindly serving the government for this long, and it's not clear why this is his breaking point, or that he was approaching his limit prior to. The thing is, there could be a perfect reason for his turning on Waller. The beach scene was actually a distraction, and Flag was the one leading everybody into the crossfire. He certainly didn't seem to be aware that this was just a mission to help the second team get into Corto Maltese. He was therefore being treated as cannon fodder, the same as the rest of the squad. He very nearly died himself. That alone could be enough of a grudge to grow towards Waller, which could explode once he discovered that Waller was orchestrating a cover-up. There's nothing sad about his death either, which likely could be remedied as well. If the Suicide Squad had taken my proposed approach to Flag's character, he could start to identify with the rest of the squad due to his treatment as cannon fodder. He could realize that these souls are more broken than they are evil, and could start to understand their pain being a part of such an inhumane task force. Maybe this way we could actually see Flag and Harley being friends, instead of Harley just proclaiming that they had become friends at some point off screen. Then, Flag's rage might become more purposeful, seeking to disassemble the squad by exposing the US government. And when Flag ultimately perishes, his death would hopefully have more weight. I don't mean to toot my own horn or claim that I am a better writer, but I feel like this is the kind of writing James Gunn would implement into his movies, and I'm baffled why he didn't. This would really have been the perfect opportunity to make Flag an actual character. Okay, I'll try to say a little less about the rest of the characters. The squad newcomers, after all, take much more of the limelight, at least the ones who are living, and get more attempted character development. Bloodsport is the obvious example. He's at odds with his daughter and just wants to make her proud that he's her father. But the problem there, disregarding the fact that it's extremely derivative of Deadshot's arc in the original movie, is that this is not convincing. When I say that, I mean that Bloodsport and his daughter have all of one scene together, which is insane. You cannot limit their interactions this much and expect us to believe Bloodsport cares about her that much. That one scene additionally gave me the most inaccurate understanding of their relationship. They just spent that scene yelling at each other and cursing each other out, so naturally you'd think that they hate each other, right? Turns out, Bloodsport gets angry at Waller for using his daughter as a negotiation tactic to join the squad, which occurs right afterwards. If you're gonna have contradictions in your movie, you shouldn't, but if you do, at least spread them out throughout the film instead of them happening consecutively. Peacemaker served as a rival type of character to Bloodsport, but I found him to be largely uninteresting and intensely unfunny. The jokes that he made in the marketing material were just as unfunny in the movie. I wish they didn't push Peacemaker as comedic relief or that they made his personality the way it was. It's not that good. His habits as someone who would start wars in the name of peace could be the comedic relief alone, but Peacemaker throughout the film seems completely unconcerned about peace. Until the last act, where he reveals that Waller had ordered him to ensure that US involvement in Project Starfish stayed secret. Yes, he is the one who killed Rick Flag because he knew that the secret getting out would break the peace. I'm not arguing that this isn't in line with his character, it very much is, and I think this actually makes his character better. My problem is that this is so sudden, and that there was no setup for this betrayal. Had Peacemaker been more suspect from the start, he could have grabbed me more quickly. Unfortunately, that was not the case, and in lieu of that, I'm not exactly looking forward to the Peacemaker spin-off series. King Shark, I I really hate this portrayal. He falls so heavily into that big, dumb, illiterate monster trope, and I'm not really a fan of that. I think the version of King Shark who appears in the Harley Quinn TV show, which is amazing, is far superior to this one. He has a couple funny moments here and there, but I don't know, that's all I have to say about him. Ratcatcher is an improvement from the rest, however. I think her backstory is really touching, how she was poverty-stricken and how the rats taught her that if even they have a purpose, she certainly could. That's so nice. And it's so sad that she was villainized simply because of her rats. I'm not going to be so bold as to say that this movie made me reconsider my stance on rats, but I will say that I was very concerned that her companion rat Sebastian was going to die. I am very relieved he didn't. But for me personally, the MVP, which really surprised me, was Polka Dot Man. He's genuinely my favorite character in this entire movie, which is really an achievement considering that this is the most ridiculous possible selection for the squad. His constant state of depression and his self-awareness of his abilities is frankly hilarious. I audibly laughed when Calendar Man or whoever it was made fun of him in the beginning. Just seeing his saddened, exasperated face was incredibly funny to me. And the punchline relating to his mom shouldn't work as well as it did. The way he casually said, "I don't like killing people, but it helps if I imagine them as my mom," is not only really funny, it's telling of who his character is. And how we constantly see the people around him as his mother is great as well. It's my humble opinion that this movie made its worst blunder by choosing to kill off this character just as he's starting to gain confidence in himself. Like, this was going to be a complete character arc and the movie just said no to that. It was very disappointing. Regardless, Polka Dot Man is possibly the most perfect character to be a part of the squad. But I am a downer, and I'm going to point out an issue consistent not only with Ratcatcher and Polka Dot Man, but with all of the squad. Any backstory or exposition necessary to understanding these characters is just awkwardly blurted out with no subtlety whatsoever. For example, Ratcatcher started tearfully monologuing about her life as a child in front of all these people whom she would have no reason to tell this. I guess it's part of her nature as a really nice girl, but it still completely feels out of place, and I also would have liked to learn about that sooner rather than halfway through the film. Or to use another example, Bloodsport saying to Peacemaker, "I think you use liberty as an excuse to do whatever you want," or something along those lines. I mean, if that's not the most direct way to tell the audience who Peacemaker is, I don't know what is. Okay, that's enough about characters. To discuss the plot, it's weird but enjoyable enough. There are a lot of politics surrounding Corto Maltese and the freedom fighters and the like, and I simply did not care. These were the most boring parts of the story for me, but I imagine that's to be expected. But I did enjoy Starro as the main villain of this movie. I did think it was kind of interesting how they made Starro a bit of a character itself. Almost a tragic character actually, in that Starro was taken away from its little pocket in space without being asked to. And it kind of does a mini commentary on the fact that the US keeps intervening where it's not really necessary. Besides that, I don't really have a whole lot to say about the plot. I think it's pretty basic superhero stuff, and like I said, the characters to me are far more important for a film like this. There are some odd points in the story that make no sense to me though. For example, those weird aquatic parasites that King Shark fools around with for a bit. Why was this included in the film? No idea. Did nothing for the story. And in the mid-credit scene where Weasel was revealed to actually be alive, that's actually pointless. I don't want to be so negative for so long, so I will say this. Every cast member is doing a fantastic job. Margot Robbie has more of a mature approach to Harley, which makes sense given the things that she's gone through in the past few movies. John Cena, though I don't like the character, was a good casting decision because he has the charisma to maintain such an obnoxious persona. It was only a minor issue not being able to see him at all. David Dastmalchian's persistent melancholy, again, is hilarious. I think the highlight of the performances, though, was Daniela Melchior, who I found to be the most impressive despite not being that well established of an actress. As many have said, she and her character are the heart and soul of the movie. Well, I'm not sure what more I have to say. I spent like 4 pages of the script venting about my character frustrations. There's definitely a lot more about this movie that I haven't touched on, but I do think that I've mentioned the most important things when watching this movie. I'm truly confused why people are lauding this film as one of the best superhero films or something really revisionist for the genre or something like that, because to me, this is a rather subpar movie. Typical DC, I suppose.